We move now to our keynote address, titled very simply, Future Next. Given by John Sanei, Knowledge Mercenary at John Sanei Inc. This presentation, well, it's not really a presentation. This discussion will look at how organizations can ensure they're agile and clear in purpose. John is the author of bestsellers such as What's Your Moonshot, Magnetize, and Foresight, and co-founder and chief exponential officer at the Future Self Academy, which is a platform that connects, as he says, the curious to leading thinkers. So, John, over to you.
Hello, Rob.
Hello there.
Wonderful
Hi.
to see you. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you.
Good, good.
So I'm going to stay in because you're going to give a very brief introduction, and then we'll do a Q&A together.
Right, great. Well, hello, everybody. Wonderful to be here. I've been listening to your chat for the last half an hour or so. I wanted to start off with two big ideas, and for us to really start to get to grips with those before we go into the rest of the talk and conversation. The first one is very much focused on our brains and us as individuals. And the second part that I want to discuss is about what's going on in the world, because I think both of them are really important for us to discuss and understand. The very first thing we must realize is that the world is under major fatigue. We are taking an incredible new type of stress onto our brains. Now, the way our brains work, the neuroplasticity that happens in our brains is that every time we get a task, we attach something called DPO to it: duration, path, and outcome. Every time we get into the car, we go on holiday, we have lunch, we know the duration of it, we know what's going to happen on the path, and we know what the outcome should be. And here we are in a world today where everything seems uncertain. Nobody knows what the duration of this process looks like. Nobody knows if we are halfway, nearly finished, nearly starting when it comes to COVID-19. And also none of us know what's going to happen on the path, and none of us know what the outcome is going to be. So there's this level of fatigue that all of us are under. And I think it's important for us to become aware of this fatigue, be more patient with ourselves and people around us while we try and figure out to get into a place of certainty again, if we ever really have another place of certainty. And also remember that this virus started off as a medical issue. It is now a socio-economic issue. It's a business issue. It's a restructuring and recalibrating of what we prioritize to buy, what we prioritize to do. And we're going to be coming out of this period of time totally changed, totally different, and rethinking what's most important and what we were doing in the old world that didn't work, that we can just leave there. So the first part is this internal process, and we'll dive deeper today into some of the tools that we could sort of practice when it comes to our mental states, because all of us are human at the end of the day, no matter what business you're in and what position you hold. These emotional things do take a lot of pressure on us. The second thing I want to touch on is how the world is changing in a broad stroke. You see, the world we come from is a complicated one, and the world we're moving into is a complex one. Now, what's the difference? There's a massive fundamental difference. You see, in the old world, I think it was Thierry who was saying that the construction industry hasn't changed for over 150 years. And we all know that it's a very solid way of doing things. And so we understand that in the old world, in the world pre-COVID, things were complicated. In other words, there was a linear line of innovation. And in a complicated world, what you had was patterns that repeated themselves. And because these patterns repeated themselves over and over and over, we could use tools like mathematics, accounting, Excel spreadsheets, and automation to be able to extrapolate the past into the future, because we understood that these patterns repeated themselves. In the world we're moving into, the complex world, the fundamental difference is that there are patterns in the complex world, but they don't repeat themselves. We don't know what's coming. We have no idea. And that's why it's so complex and not complicated. And in the world of complexity, trying to use the old tools of mathematics, accounting, automation really will get you into a lot of trouble, because those tools are all about economies of scale and mass efficiency. The world we're moving into requires economies of learning and robustness. Now, these are fundamentally different. Let me give you an example to land it for you. When you go onto a plane and when you get to the airport, you put your suitcase onto the conveyor belt, and the suitcase gets to you on the plane in the most efficient, complicated manner. Now, I'm sure you've seen some videos about how those suitcases work behind the scenes. It is absolute chaos. There are so many suitcases going everywhere, but because of automation and because of the efficiency that they've created, we hardly have any people touching those suitcases, just at the end and maybe at the beginning. But really, those bags get to you in the most efficient way possible, as cheaply as possible, and really with no people involved. But the minute you get onto the plane, you're now not in a complicated world with patterns anymore. Now you're in a complex world with no patterns. That's why on a plane, what you have is you have 4 engines when 1 is enough. You have 3 pilots when 1 is enough. You have 4 operating systems when 1 is enough. And why is that? The reason is when you're up in the air, you can't be focused on efficiency. You got to be focused on safety. And so what if some of the pilots die? Well, we've got a backup. What if some of the operating systems go down? Well, we've got a backup for the backup for the backup. And what if 1 or 2 or 3 of the engines go down? Well, we've got backups of engines as well. That's why flying is one of the safest ways for us to transport ourselves, because it's been built for complexity, not complications. Now, in a world of complexity, we have to be ready for all scenarios. And that's why business structures have to keep their focus on efficiencies, because that's obviously important to keep the lights on. But we also need to start building and thinking and planting and recalibrating ourselves for what's coming. And we know that what's coming is uncertain. So what we have to do in order to prepare for uncertainty is develop robust business models, robust structures that give ourselves an opportunity to experiment, try things, and see what grabs and what doesn't grab. Now, most business owners don't want to hear this, because all business owners want to focus on efficiency and profitability and economies of scale. And all of those are very, very important. But remember, if you're not planting seeds in for tomorrow through a process of experimentation, through a process of developing a tomorrow team, a team that thinks about tomorrow, that doesn't have to worry about yesterday or today, you will find yourself in trouble, because we see many businesses that are hugely successful and all of a sudden they're gone. Now, one example before I come back to you, Rob, is Japan Airlines right now has developed this idea of complicated and complex, also known as innovation and disruption. Now, innovation is well known to be doing what you always did, just a bit better. And so these incremental innovation processes are very, very important for businesses. But disruption is something totally different. Disruption is making your current business model obsolete to create a new business model. Now, most people think they're the same, but they're absolutely different. So you can't have people innovating and disrupting. They almost sit in different camps. So Japan Airlines knows this, and Japan Airlines developed a tomorrow team, or a disruption team, that was thinking about the future of travel. And what they did was they developed an avatar system where you put on a suit from head to toe, where you have a visceral experience of heat, of touch, of cold, or whatever the case may be. Now, what happens when you put this helmet on and the suit, you're able to travel to anywhere in the world and have a very realistic experience of it. They are already experimenting with paraplegic people that have never been able to walk, to have the sensations of this process of moving through water or land. And so you can now travel with your grandmother to anywhere in the world, or even to Mars, utilizing Japan Airlines Tomorrow Team's ideas. Now, this is the point, is that the people that are worrying about the flights being efficient, pilots being trained, airports being ready, and the air hostesses being trained, and customers coming in, that is the team that focuses on the today. And then they have a totally different team focused on tomorrow, because the virtual reality people here, the people creating the suits, have got nothing to do with being engineers or pilots. And so this is the idea that we need to land and give context for the next sort of half an hour together, is that 1, we are all taking a new type of fatigue and emotional stress. We need to be more patient and calmer as we go through this. And 2, we have to prepare for complexity while we are still working in a complicated world, as it starts fading away and starts moving into a more complex, unplanned, unpatterned world. Rob?
I'm guessing we are in an unplanned, unpatterned situation at the moment in the world with COVID. It has completely changed the way people have to think. Businesses have to completely think differently. And, you know, we're seeing lots of we're seeing lots of small scale kind of changing in thinking. I'm trying to think of some ideas, but things like in the UK, I was listening to an example today where a company, a shop was told, you're not selling essential items during the lockdown, you have to close. So the owner went and bought some essential items, put them into his shop window, and then stayed open so that he could say, I am selling essential items, but I'm also selling these non-essential items, which you have said I am allowed to do as long as I've got essential items.
Very smart.
So
I like that.
So, and I guess that's what you want, isn't it? You want that thinking differently to solve those sorts of challenges.
Well, remember, that is innovation, and that's very smart and very necessary. But disruption is having a delivery business rather than a business that people have to come to. You understand? It's like it's flipping the business model that you have to think about these things. Now, what most business owners stress about and most execs stress about is the fact that they need to come up with the plans for tomorrow. And I want to give everybody a breath of fresh air. You don't have to. And it's not up to you, because your capabilities and your abilities, the reason that you've gotten yourself to this executive level is that you've been excellent at doing what we needed to do to get to this point. What we need to do from this point moving forward requires new capabilities, requires new abilities that maybe you don't have, maybe you do, but really the strength of a leader in today's world is having the courage to hire people with these new capabilities and to give them some sort of budget for them to play with and experiment with to see what they could create for tomorrow's world.
So John, the moment of disruption, you have your tomorrow team, you have your today team. Maybe you're a successful company, but you've seen that if you don't change, that success won't continue. And I mean, there's been plenty of examples, even in the last 20 years, there's been very, very good examples of companies that didn't see tomorrow, carried on with their very successful business, and then one day suddenly it wasn't successful anymore.
Yes.
So you have your tomorrow team, the disruption team.
Yeah.
You now think you're ready. How do you flip your business so that you remain successful, or do you have to accept you go through some pain?
Well, great question. Okay, so there's two options here, right? One of them is called scaling the edges. And scaling the edges is this idea that you bring in a team, a consultant, some futurists, some strategists, and we work out with you what is required as possibilities on the edge of your scale of your sector, right? Scaling the edges of your sector. And what we do is we set up these small startups at the edge, and we watch them and see what they do and how they grow and how the market takes to them. Now we have a choice. When we see one or two of them start really doing well, we take one of our execs and we pop them into the startup and allow the startup to start having its own set of businesses, own parallel process next to yours. And it's up to you, depending on your business, your industry, whether you want to bring that business into your fold or you want to keep it in the parallel place and just let it go. Now, that's one option. The other option is to be able to just start new businesses. And I think that's really important for us to really think about, is that just because you've been doing this business for all this time doesn't mean you necessarily have to stay in this business all this time. If you have the foresight and if you understand what the world could possibly look like based on consumers' need states and expectations, you could just jump ships. Now, the most famous business, Amazon, how many businesses are they in? 22 at the last time I checked. They have got so many multiple businesses happening that have got nothing to do with their core business of selling books. They've just been jumping sectors, hiring the best and allowing them to grow, and have one of the most patient processes of experimentation and innovation and disruption. Another one, Tesla, jumping between all sorts, not Tesla, Elon Musk, jumping between all sorts of sectors, wanting to experiment with all different types of things. So it's up to you. You want to scale the edges or you want to just run new parallel businesses? That becomes your choice. But the thing is that don't think for a second that you don't need to be doing that. I think it was McKinsey who came out with a stat that said 70% of your money should be focused on keeping the lights on and keeping things efficient, but 30% should be focused on planting seeds. And yesterday I was in quite a big platform when we were speaking, and some of the execs said to me, well, how can we guarantee success out of that 30%? And that question itself is the faulty question, because you can't guarantee success, because you have to make sure you're experimenting just in case we get to that sort of world. So there is no guaranteed success in this complexity of a world that we're moving into.
So interestingly, so I have in the past worked for a company where we were very, very successful at what we did. Another company that was bigger came along and bought us. They merged us in with their unit and we just died. They broke us basically. So when you have that sort of thing where you have something, an idea, a disruption, how do you make sure you don't break it? You know, how, if you're popping in an exec to run that, how do you make sure that actually that progress still continues?
Yeah, that's a great question, you know, and Rob, I would need to be in that specific scenario, but what you're talking about there is the immune system, and well documented by Salim Ismail, the CEO of Exco around the world. And he talks about this immune system where an organization naturally has an immune system. And without even realizing it, the people that work inside that organization can't gel with new ideas. And so the mistake they most probably made is they didn't leave you and let you be and carry on being profitable and driving it. They wanted you bring you into the main body, and the immune systems in that main body killed you. So what I would think is that the strategist had it right. The operational people didn't. The memo didn't arrive, or somehow they got joined too quickly. So again, this is a base project by project basis. You know, I've worked in the travel industry. I worked in the diamond industry. Let me give you an example there and how different it is. I worked with one of the world's largest, if not the largest, diamond business here in South Africa. And what they asked me to do was look at the future of diamonds with them. And we looked at the future of diamonds and we realized that the question was wrong. The question should be not what is the future of diamonds, but what is the future of luxury? Because the truth is that diamonds represents luxury. Now, and through a lot of stats and research, we saw that about 25% of the human population are governed and motivated by a mega trend called guilt-free consumption. These people have got lots of money, but they don't drive cars, they don't buy high fashion items, they go to markets around the world. They really don't like diamonds, I can tell you that. And so what's happening with this company is they are losing this 25 or 30% of their market. And so what they did was they developed a tomorrow team that is now focused on developing what luxury looks like for this new market. And so they've kept their today business. They're still doing diamonds very successfully for the emerging market because they still see that as luxury. But they've now developed a tomorrow team that's parallel to their business that doesn't even have their name on it. It's just running parallel, running luxury ideas, which is actually, if you want to know, it's bespoke experiences. This is what these people love more than anything else, is ecotourism and bespoke experiences. And that becomes a brand new business for them never to bring into a mining business, because what do miners know about travel? Nothing.
So John, I mean, this has been a really interesting conversation, and I love the answers, because so far, I've not asked you a single question that you knew you were going to be asked. Yeah, and you've had great examples, great insight, and really interesting answers for every single one of them.
Cool.
We're obviously discussing the digitalization, the digital transformation of construction. Now, construction is an industry that is renowned for being fairly slow to embrace new technologies, but I'm seeing a lot of willingness and a lot of interest in embracing new ideas, new ways of working, new processes, and what they can do. So how, with what you're saying, with the way you're talking about the disruptors, the innovators, etc., how can we kind of line that up with construction? What the people who are sitting here listening now, you know, what are they taking away with them?
So look, I would imagine it's a similar world to mining, right? It's an age-old process. There's an efficiency at hand. There's projects at play. In the mining world, you have upstream, midstream, and lower stream. You guys have got most probably procurement, architecture, management. You know, got that whole process. So you've got the similar process. The thing for me is, you don't have to come up with what's needed tomorrow. You know, the digital transformation that you're having, you must also realize that the digital transformation that we've always seen in the past is about bringing more efficiency to your current business model. That's not always digital transformation. That is doing what you always did, just better on a computer. You know, the first time they took a school and digitally transformed it, what do? They put all the textbooks on an iPad. Now, that is digital transformation, but it's not really digital transformation if you think about it. And so there's layering to digital transformation. In fact, let's not even call it digital. Let's just talk it transformation, right? Because obviously it's digital, but it's also mindset. It's also capabilities. It's also different markets. So let's forget digital and let's talk transformation. Now, transformation has three sections. It has the SAD, the strange, and the adventure. The sad, because all transformations have to start with an ending, because you have to say goodbye to something that you were familiar with, a comfort zone, and that's sad. You have to say goodbye. And then you get into strange, and strange is where we are right now, where nothing makes sense, nothing's familiar, you can't connect any dots, it's all up in the air. And then eventually we'll get to adventure again, and adventure will pick up new momentum. We are squarely in no man's land. And in no man's land, there's a great saying that says, when nothing is certain, anything is possible. And we have this opportunity, while things are so uncertain, to rewrite the rules as far or as conservatively as we feel comfortable to do. So as construction people, what I would suggest you do is try and understand what it is you're trying to do at the end of the day. Are you building? Are you housing? Are you putting people in office? I hope you're not putting people in offices, because I don't think that's going to be a very good business moving forward. But what part of that process are you actually doing? And then how else could you be servicing those things? Bring in a team to try and think about more services and allow them to transform on the edge, and then work backwards to scaling into efficiencies and bringing about new innovation, new disruption, and ultimately scaling the edges on the end. So look, it's a multi-layered process, and it takes us weeks, if not months, to work with organizations to layer them so we know exactly who's doing what, when, and where, because it's a process of transformation. And so right now, the strange place we're in is the perfect place to think about it in the most extreme way possible.
See, I think you're very right, actually, in that I think with all of these things, you start off with a particular phrase and eventually you drop one aspect of it and talk about transformation rather than digital transformation. And I think it suddenly isn't quite as scary as well. Sometimes the word digital, it makes people think maybe they're going to be replaced, or they're going to have to learn processes that just are not in the way their brain works. So it's an interesting...
Rob, both of those are valid. That is what's going on. You have to unlearn to relearn, right?
Yeah.
There's a great saying that says the knowledgeable man has to learn something new every day. The wise man has to unlearn something new every day. And it's this wisdom that we require. And remember that we are living in a surplus society. And what I mean by that is that we have a world of surplus skills. And the reason for this is that all universities around the world have been teaching pretty much the same subjects. So no matter where you go in the world, everybody's kind of trained in the same way. So we live in a surplus of accountants, of lawyers, and there's just so many of these people, because it used to be the case if you had a degree, you were guaranteed. And now you have a degree, doesn't mean anything, actually. So we also have to realize that there isn't this opportunity for us to lose our jobs, lose our businesses, have to unlearn to relearn is the reality of where we are. We can't avoid those. And in fact, we shouldn't avoid them. We should be jumping into them and saying, look, it's tough, it's not easy, but it's something I have to do. And I just use myself as an example. I've got a few businesses, but my own speaking business, I had my biggest contract signed up for the next year around the world, speaking for a major a company, and all of it got taken away. I mean, it was just like that overnight, right? So I had to reinvent my business. Did I sulk a little bit? Yes. Did I get a little bit angry? Yes. But eventually I had to get on with it, and I had to start reinventing and rethinking. So just to touch on that point, yes, you might lose your job. Yes, you might have to learn something new. Yes, you might have a problem with your business. That's what disruption is, and we shouldn't be scared of it. We should be diving deeper into it.
But do you think this is innovation? I mean, your example there is a very good one, and very similar to my company, where we, over the course of about 5 days, because of COVID, we suddenly saw all our contracts disappear. We sat down, we talked about it, and we said, okay, let's start again. And now we're back. We never really left, but now, we essentially said, yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
This is where we go. The trade delegations we won't do them in person anymore. We'll do them using Zoom, et cetera, et cetera. But does that not count as kind of innovation and kind of forced innovation?
Of course, this is innovation, but then you also have a choice, Rob. Do you want to be disruptive or just innovative? And I think that's, again, a personal choice. There's no right answer, right? I've also been disruptive because I've taken all my master classes and put them onto an online university. That's quite disruptive because I'm making my current business model obsolete to create a new business model. And so, yes, it's up to you and it's your choice. Do you want to be innovative? You want to be disruptive? You want to be in between? You want to be both? That's your choice. What I suggest is that you become courageous and that you do both, because we think we're in an uncertain world now. We have no idea what's coming. We keep seeing countries going into lockdown. We got a vaccine. We don't know if it's going to work or not. We don't know if the efficacy is right. We have a president who doesn't want to leave his office. We just have no idea. And we have so many domino effects of bankruptcies that are still coming, that are still going to be taking shape moving forward. I would suggest courage is by far the most important characteristic, combined with resilience, that we can have as owners, employees, execs, whatever the case may be, is in order for us to be able to get ready for this incredibly uncertain world that we're moving into.
Yeah, I suppose actually in construction, that means that, when you're with what you're talking about, it's not just, for instance, the contractor that needs to embrace this. It's also the client, the person who wants the building developed, and they need to be thinking about different ways perhaps that their buildings can be developed. I know I live in Dubai. Here, there's a target that within a few years, 30% of all buildings will be 3D printed. I would consider that, and again, I would consider that disruptive. But everything you're saying is quite new to me now. And we're, again, the industry. One of the previous speakers was talking about modular design, where it's much more of a factory process. Again, completely different way of thinking about how you move forwards, but it also means the client has to think differently. And
yes, of course. And I think the best thing we can do is become thought leaders for our clients and advisors to them. And once we're able to do that with our clients, we build this incredible level of trust, and price becomes secondary. It's that need for that thought leadership. And I think that's also another amazing thing that we could all be doing, is becoming more advisory and more thought leaders in our specific skill sets, so that we can advise people before we actually sell them the products or services.
Okay, so final question then. It was actually going to be my first question, but then we took a left turn, which was when I was listening to you speaking at the beginning, I was thinking, does this mean that education needs to be fundamentally rethought, and training in any industry needs to be rethought? Because right now we're sort of teaching children, this is the way you think, and then you go to university and it's a little bit more free spirit, and it's a little bit more guidance, but you go and do your own research. But then, with certain industries, certain professions, again, you're still kind of taught more. So do we need the training, both kind of post university level, when people start entering business? Does that need to be rethought, and even maybe at previous levels?
Look, it's a tough place for education. And I'll tell you why, is we are so in the middle of this transition between the old linear industrial revolution world and this new quantum dynamic digital world that we're moving into, that we have this one foot old, one foot in the new. Nobody actually knows what the future looks like. But you also can't really take your kids out of school, because what are you going to do with them, even though they're learning things they could just Google? So it's actually no point, in fact, learning any of those things. So it's a tough place. But what I think is really important is there are these core skills. Some people call them soft skills. I get very upset when they do, because they're actually core skills. And in the world we're moving into, what we need, I think the very first thing we need to teach our kids is passion. Now, passion is a very difficult thing to teach, because how do you teach anybody passion? But actually, passion is derived from exposure. Now, I know, Rob, you and me, when we were growing up, we only saw our mom and dad's careers and maybe our friends' mom and dad's careers. And then what did you choose? You were one of those careers because you liked your uncle and he was an architect. And you're like, I want to be just like my uncle. I'm going to be an architect. You weren't exposed to many different careers. So you didn't actually get an opportunity to live out your passion, your curiosity, and your excitement. I think the world we're moving into is so not linear, and it's so dynamic, that if your child, or even yourself, are not incredibly fascinated with the topic that you are working with, you will become fatigued, upset, and angry very quickly. The only thing that will get us through this incredible multi-adaptive, multifaceted world is fascination, curiosity, excitement, and passion. So the first thing I always tell people that I work with is get your child, no matter how old they are, in fact, even yourself, if you like, is to dissect a career every 2 weeks and do a 10-minute presentation on that career. Doctor, lawyer, AI, whatever you want to do, whatever it is, hairdresser, pilot, whatever. And then figure out which parts of the career you love and don't love. And then eventually, by the end of the year, you've now done 24 different careers that you could find passion or not find passion in. And instead of trying to fit into the box, we have to realize that we need to become the machine, not the cog in the machine. So the world requires us to show up differently. Some of the other subjects I talk about is teaching empathy, or teaching storytelling, or teaching grit. You know, another thing that the kids today don't have much of is grit. And the reason is we live in a digital world. And so imagine your child once a month would dissect an entrepreneur's life. And then they would figure out that that entrepreneur has nearly been bankrupt 3 times, went through a divorce, had a heart disease before they got to being this successful picture. So there's many different core skills that we should be thinking about and teaching our kids while they're at school, or even after school. And here's a little secret. We all need to be learning them, because the world we're moving into, we're going to be competing with our kids really soon. And how many of people's kids on this call right now are already really dynamic online? I know some of my friends' kids are selling things on Instagram. I don't even know how to sell things on Instagram yet. These kids are on it, on the way there. And guess what? In the future, you and I will be competing against these kids, because that will be the marketplace all of us need to be working on.
John, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. And again, thank you, because you didn't know any of the questions that I was going to throw at you. So it's been really interesting hearing your answers, given the depth and also the examples you've given, and hopefully it's painted a picture in people's heads. So thank you.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.